in the car.
Yes.
And so
Do they know what the 1500 call?
they
We
did
do
not
now.
seem to know what it was, so whether they wanted to hear it or not, I was talking about it. And just when you come into real estate, you do it because you want to be flexible. And then you realize, oh, if I'm actually gonna have business and get a paycheck, there's no flexibility at all. Hi, Rebecca. I'm glad to see you.
Thank you. Today's my launch day. I actually paused launch to come
Oh,
to this. 'Cause I wanted to see your
oh,
stuff,
well, thank you. No, me too. People love it, and they love the camaraderie.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Me too. Yeah, I said 10:02 just because we're real estate agents.
No,
so-
I 100%
It's-
agree with
I
that.
hate excuses, but.
It's 10:02. We have the queen.
we have
10:02.
I know. Diana could go so loud. The other day I told a story about going into the team leader, top 50 team leader room.
Oh, I want to hear more about that.
Well, at that time Diana was running it, and there were 2 team leaders who did not have the correct name badge, were sitting in the back. She literally walked right up to me and said, "Why are you here?" And they said, "Well, you just want to learn." And she said, "Get out." Now, I've never heard anybody she said, "Get out." Here's the thing, you want to learn from them, they don't want to hear one word you might have to say. I mean, she was deep. I was like, okay, well, whoa. Just when I think I'm direct, you get with somebody else and you realize, oh, I'm fine.
I haven't experienced Diana interview.
Woo!
Way.
It was a tough crowd.
We're at 11:02.
Okay, it's time. You can even sit on the front row.
Woohoo!
Like
Sure,
church.
for you,
Thanks.
Church. I may put my coffee down there.
I probably won't drink it.
Okay.
For this thing?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, awesome.
And we have quite a few on Zoom.
Okay,
So you're.
and I'm standing in the right place?
Yes. Yes. They can say.
Okay, I guess that's great.
My big head is blocking it.
You're fine. All right, we are here today to talk about new contract forms. And we are here today because they are voluntarily available right now. So you may begin to see them. They are not mandatory until February 1st. So on February 1st, you must begin to use the new forms. No choice. So we want to be prepared and ready. And I want you to be thinking right now about your folders that you have where you go out and you just access your folder and start writing a contract. We'll realize your folder that you've made isn't going to automatically update. So you have to update it. Okay? So this happens every year. This is just kind of a thing, right? I've clearly been through this before. So I want you right now to be planning to update your folders. However it is that you write a contract, they will not be updating your personal information. DocuSign will update, zip forms will update, all that stuff is updating automatically, but not your personal files. Okay? All right. I also want to tell you that I don't think, and I'm saying this everywhere I go, I don't think I've ever known a time where you need to be a contract expert more than you do right now. The whole world, I think, is kind of sitting in fear. We had more sellers pull off the market in November statistically than we've ever had before, ever. So they're sitting in fear. They're not in pain, really. Most people that I talk to, That includes all of you as real estate agents. Right, I talked to a lot of real estate agents today, and a lot of them are a little fearful, but not yet in pain. They put enough money in the bank, or they have enough things in their pipeline where they're not yet in pain, but they're fearful. So to me, you being here and being a contract expert is one solid thing you can do to project yourself as the professional. They don't need, I think that just what people need from us has changed so much, right? It used to be just a friend thing. They called who they knew. And now they want to call someone great at the job. And your job is not property condition. Your job is not any of these other things. Your job really is this contract. That's what your job is. How does it work, and how can you get them successfully from contract to close? So we're going to talk about all these new forms and see how we do. All right. I'm stepping out of the way for a minute. This is all of the forms that will have an updated version. I just want you to stop and go, oh, crap. That's every form, just about every form. Oh, okay. Yep, that's what it is. Almost every form. Come on in. Don't be shy. So you can't take this lightly. It's not a sentence here or a sentence there. It's literally every form. That's why I'm so glad you're here, and I'm glad to be here so that we slow down and understand what's happening. What are the important things? Why does it seem like the forms always change? Well, these have not changed since 2020, which they apparently think is a long time. It doesn't feel like a long time to me. Feels like we just did this. What I really wanted you to see is this bottom paragraph that says TREC does not promulgate listing or buyer representation agreements, property management contracts, commercial documents, or residential leases. So do you know where to get those? Because they're not TREC forms. You do. TXRE or whatever they're, TXR. Yes. The Texas Association of Realtors said it's no longer that anymore.
Texas Realtors.
Yeah.
All this stuff now.
Yes, okay. That's who does that. So when people ask me like about the listing agreement and can I mark through it and can I change it? I mean, for our purposes, the answer is no, right? Because it's made to protect you and to protect us. We don't want to do that. It's a slightly different level. It's not the law, right? Do you understand that things promulgated by TREC are approved by the Texas legislature and they are law? So it's a whole different level of seriousness. So what we're going to talk about today is serious. Some of you, here's what you'll do. Sorry in advance to make fun of you, but I'm going to, just because I want you to see it coming, right? In March, you're going to turn in a contract that's out of date. And you're going to be like, what is wrong with you? The buyer and the seller don't care. That other agent on the other side doesn't care. Why do you care? Why? Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop right there. It's the law. LAW. I don't know how to say it any stronger, right? It's not Keller Williams. It's not that little independent broker who doesn't care. Well, okay, I don't know what else they don't care about, right? They may never pay their bills and they may speed all day, every day. I don't do those things. Well, I do speed. But you know what I'm saying? Like, just because they want to break the law, does that make it okay for all of us to break the law, right? It's the law. So that's why I want to stop and just remind you guys, it is important. You are a licensee. For you to use out-of-date forms is considered unacceptable. And if you get into a TREC complaint, they will fine you hefty. Because this is your job. It is your job to be a licensee to use the correct forms, which are the law. Okay, so that's my lecture for the day. Like, this is not just a choice. We're not choosing. This is what we got to do. All right, here we go. So life isn't about trying to be an expert in everything. It's about being an expert in one thing and offering it to the world, right? And so this is what you're choosing. You're choosing to be an expert in real estate. Real estate license holders are required to use Texas Real Estate Commission forms. So it is possible for two people to write on a napkin that they're gonna sell their property. And then they're gonna take that napkin and go to an attorney's office, not even a title office, and make it happen. That's legal in Texas. If one of them has a Texas real estate license, is the napkin legal? No. By having a real estate license, you are required to use promulgated forms. Okay? I know, people don't like any of this. Okay, so this is just a snapshot. You don't have to read it. It's all the changes to all the forms. All the forms did strange things like capitalize escrow agent everywhere and capitalize survey. Okay, whatever. So there's a bunch of just little administrative type things, and we're not really going to worry about that too much. All right. So then this brings us to page 1 of the 1 to 4. All right. This is actually one of the big changes, and I'm not going to hit every change. I just want to talk about kind of the big changes. All right. They added this sentence, the term cash portion of the sales price does not include proceeds from borrowing of any kind or selling other real property except as disclosed in this contract. So tell me what you think they're trying to stop from happening. Yes.
People writing a cash contract, but they're borrowing from hard money or private money.
Thumbs up. That's exactly right. They don't want that to happen anymore. Because basically it was always a little bit, not honest. But now they're directly addressing it. What else are they trying to avoid?
Not disclosing if it's contingent.
Not disclosing if it's contingent. Oh my gosh, there's a person in Denton County who runs a real estate office, his name I shall not mention, who at first was teaching their agents to rely on third-party finance instead of making it contingent. Do you understand what that means? So they lied. They did not disclose that it was contingent on the receipt of proceeds from sale of another property. They just then terminated in the days for the buyer to be approved. Do you understand that? Well, that's fraud. So I just wanted, they didn't do that very long, and they got a $5,000 fine because they were teaching people to commit fraud. Whoops. Okay. So now Trek has decided to address that up front. If it is contingent on the sale of another property and they're using that money to buy this one, you've got to disclose it right here under sales price, right? You've got to have the addendum for sale of other property by buyer attached. So the third thing I mentioned over here is proof of funds. So how many of you ever asked for proof of funds of a down payment? Some do. How many of you are just sure that your awesome lender's handling that? Oh, come on, you got to raise your hand one way or the other.
I would always
Call
call the lender.
the lender.
I would call the lender. I would ask where the down payment's coming from. Is it tied up in retirement? Is it, because I had a deal go south where I didn't do that and the money was tied up in the retirement fund that got locked and they couldn't access it, so then the contract terminated.
Yep.
So I learned a hard lesson.
I do not think that we as agents have typically asked for proof of funds for a down payment. I think we typically think the lender's got it, or, who would work with a buyer that doesn't have any money, whatever. I think those days are gone. I don't want to sound too cynical, but I think I am too cynical right now, right? People are just behaving badly.
So what would that look like so that it's not just, like I met with a guy once and he was showing me that he had proof, but he ended up showing me all of his bank accounts across 3 or 4 different banks going, okay, this is a lot, but really you should be talking to the lender who's gonna work with you on the other. I mean, so how do we handle that? So it's not just like, send me a snapshot, you're thinking.
For a buyer?
Yeah.
Right. I think then you do send them to the lender and then a lender you trust. So one of the things that I really would be comfortable saying and doing right now with a buyer, someone I'm gonna work with, that I'm gonna sign a buyer rep agreement with, which means I have an obligation to them also, right? That buyer rep agreement is a two-way street. So I don't want to commit to somebody with no money, right? Like I'm disinterested in this. So I want them to go to a lender that I know, like, and trust. So here's three. You really need to talk, and they'll do a soft credit pull that doesn't hurt their credit. And so if I meet with a buyer who refuses to speak to anyone I know at all, okay, well then I'm not signing the buyer rep.
Right.
It's not about whether they'll sign it, it's I'm not signing it. Because what they're gonna be is one big time suck. I mean, and they're already not cooperating. Oh my God, what are the chances we're gonna get to closing? I mean, they're already not cooperating kind of with the plan, and the plan works and the plan exists because we wanna work with, you know, professional support people. I mean, a closing is a miracle. We gotta have a great title company, we gotta have a great surveyor, we gotta have a great appraiser, we gotta have a great lender. Oh my God, it's a miracle. I mean, if 6, 7, or 8 people show up with their best professionalism, that's awesome. But yet our pay depends on that happening. So if you got a crappy buyer who goes, no, I have my own people. Well, okay, bye. Go get it. Go find somebody else, right? So I want you to stop and just understand the power of what Trek is doing. When they change a contract, there's always a reason. So if you represent a buyer who in the end cannot show up to close because they do not have cash, because they're getting a hard money loan or doing something, and we get in a Trek complaint or a lawsuit, now we're looking for trouble, right? They have stopped and addressed it. So you need to address it also, right? Anybody else have any thoughts about that? One little sentence, it feels really important to me.
So with that, what's in blue is what they're adding?
What's in blue is what they're adding. Thank you. Yes, I chose to show you what they call the red line. It's actually more of a blue line. But what's changing is highlighted in blue.
So how do you disclose if it's a hard money or private money loan? Is it on the?
It's on the third-party finance addendum now. When we get there, I'll show you. Great. All right. Anything else? Okay, here we go. Then we move all the way to paragraph 6. And paragraph 6 now includes the mud and PID notices, and they are taken out of that paragraph 22, the addendum. Do you see that? Here's the purpose. An addendum sounds like it's voluntary almost. You either add it or you don't add it. They don't feel that way about mud notices and PID notices, right? It's required. So they moved it to the required section. And I want to be sure you know, for your sellers, you have to have that notice included on MLS with the listing, with the seller's disclosure notice. If the buyer is not given the mud notice or the PID notice before the contract is executed, then that buyer can terminate any time before closing and get their earnest money. Their right to terminate doesn't go away the minute you give them the PID notice. That's not true. If they execute the contract and you give them the PID notice the very next day, they still can terminate all the way up to closing.
You said they have to receive it before it's executed?
Before it's executed. So the right thing to do is attach it to the seller's disclosure notice, like as one document online, in my opinion. Even though it doesn't require buyer signature at that moment, then if they sign the seller's disclosure notice, which you're going to remember to worry over, you know they've gotten it.
So have them sign it when you're accepting that contract along with your solar system.
Right, or at least we can prove they got it. Because I've sat through so many things, right? I want everybody to sign everything, but mostly I want to be able to prove that they got it.
Mhm.
Okay. Do y'all have PID mud notice questions? Are you doing okay? It's kind of a mess.
I have a question on my phone right now.
Good.
Someone who has sent me a question. It's a Wise County question. So
Okay,
most of the, or Wise County is in the Wise County Public Improvement.
yes,
Wise County, it's a WCID, Water Improvement and Control District.
okay,
Okay, so the Water and Improvement and Control District over there has given them this form,
okay,
right? But it doesn't have anywhere for anybody to sign it, and it really just has the amounts that they have to pay. So to me, that's information for them to use to put on the WCID notice, not use that instead of the contract.
so
Would
I
you
agree with you. Yes, ideal is to put it on
Put
the
that information on there. Worst
Yes.
case scenario, use that to make them sign
initial right next to how much it is, and I bet you'd be fine.
it. That's what I think.
You know? Yeah. All right, anything else? I mean, this is, you know, and your seller, this is right up there with mineral rights. Well, I don't know. Okay. Well, would you like to sell or would you like to just sit here not knowing? That's kind of your two choices. We have to know something, right? We have to know something. And they do know, and particularly right now they know because they're getting ready to pay all their taxes and they get tax bills and it's lined out for you. If you live in a pit or a mud or any sort of improvement district, it's lined out for you on your tax bill. So whenever sellers say they don't know, there's a just a level of, well, you can know. It's possible for you to know, and I need for you to know, right? So, okay. 7F, I suspect this is the biggest change that is going to affect our daily lives. And so I'm going to read you across the top, which is Trek's statement about this. Paragraph 7F is revised to require, seller shall, that the seller provide the buyer with copies of documentation from the repair person that shows the scope of work. Okay, let's just stop right there. Why do you think that scope of work, what does that mean? Says, I repaired that knob. Did they fix the whole air conditioner? Well, not if they run. Scope of work. So this is where 99% of lawsuits come from, right here. The amendment says repair the knob. And the seller repairs the knob. And the air conditioning guy says, you know, you really need the knob and the filter and the thingamabob. And the seller goes, I'm not doing the filter and the thingamabob. I agreed to do the knob. This is a really dumb example. Sorry. But you know what I mean? I mean, this is right now where it happens. The seller doesn't update their seller's disclosure notice to say, I need a new filter and a new thingamabob. They don't update it. They just don't do anything. Then the buyer moves in, and I don't know how this happens every time, but they call the same air conditioner guy who says, oh, I told them they needed a filter and a thingamabob.
I don't know what this is for.
And then we're in a lawsuit, and who do you think wins? The buyer. Not sometimes, every time. By the way, because did the buyer know before closing that they needed a filter and a thingamabob? Yeah, they did, because they had a repair done. Oh, the seller, no, the buyer, sorry, yes. The seller knew and didn't do it. I mean, you should update that seller's disclosure notice right up till closing. There's a form for that called the update to the seller's disclosure notice, right? You should be using it right up till closing.
Can you, I'm sorry.
No, this is why we're here.
So to clarify, Are you saying the repair amendment says do the knob, AC guy says you need all the stuff, seller says I'm only doing the knob, so then you write on the seller's just, or you update the seller disclosure and say it needs a filter and a thing, the knob is fixed or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they're cut, so they don't have to do it as long as they're, and then you send it to the
That's
other
right.
agent.
That's correct.
And then they're gonna want the filter and the thing about.
And then they're
Exactly.
gonna want the filter and the thingamabob.
Exactly.
But, so what part of it, I mean, until that buyer buys the home, I am totally okay with the seller being required to disclose everything that needs to be fixed in the home,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Until that buyer buys, so that the buyer is buying with full knowledge.
Makes sense.
I mean.
Yeah.
It's. And
People
so,
never
when is
get-
this gonna be over? When is the buyer gonna quit asking? Well, just as soon as you quit finding out crap that's broken.
People never get sued for over disclosure.
No, they never get sued. Ooh, I'm gonna steal that sentence.
I've never seen that.
Never
You
get
told me
sued
too
for
much, I'm gonna
over
sue you.
disclosure. That's right.
Just tell them.
So I think the repair guy writing the scope of work is an important thing. So now the repair guy is not just gonna write $170 and $170 at the bottom. He needs to write fix the knob. That's the scope of work that he did. He fixed the knob. He didn't check the AC. He didn't verify it's all functioning appropriately. He didn't, because that's not what the amendment said. Now, if the amendment says verify everything is functioning as intended or whatever, then that's a different amendment. And then he needs to write what scope of work he did, what did he check, what's okay. I think this is a really big change. And they're trying to fix what we all know has been happening that's just a mess after closing. I mean, because then your buyer writes you an email and says, oh my God, I just spent $6,000 on a whole new air conditioner. I knew the air conditioner was 20,000 years old, but I thought it was gonna be fine. Okay. And here we go, right? Now it involves us. And it will involve you every time because you're building a relationship. You want their trust. So they're going to talk to you every single time they buy a home and then find something wrong with it. So the better you get at writing the scope of work that you want done on that amendment. So this whole little story I just told is exactly how I would speak to my buyer. Now, if you want the seller to agree, we probably need to write, they're gonna fix the knob. You'll have a new knob. Now, we don't know about all the rest of the AC. So we got a home warranty, we're doing our best that they're gonna fix the knob. If we just ask them to fix the whole thing, we might as well ask them to get a new one. And then potentially we're not going to end up with the home. So, but discuss it, right? Have a good conversation about what they're asking for and expectations. They're buying a used home. Most of them know that the AC is 11 years old and the roof is 10 years old, right? Okay, so come on. Have the conversation. All right. Repair person shows both the scope of work and payment for the work completed. So we also see a lot of times where they'll just scribble where you can't really read, it's not really legible. Then they'll write $170 and they'll write $170 and nowhere on the receipt does it say paid. And we as buyer's agents are just so happy to get a receipt that we don't say anything about, it doesn't say, well, of course it's paid. Well, okay, of course it's paid, doesn't really work in court. Right? So begin to think of all the records you actually need to have in your possession. So we need to show that it payment of the work completed. And now, if the seller does not provide that, who is in default? The seller. So providing receipts that do not show the scope of work and that it's paid for, that's the seller in default of the contract. And the buyer is out. Okay? And then part 2, transfer at seller's expense any transferable warranties at closing. Well, the buyer didn't ask for me to pay for that. It's gone. How many foundation companies, I mean, there's several that I know of, right, who charge at least a small charge to transfer the warranty, and the seller sends all the info, but they don't do anything. They just send the info, and then the buyer has to do it. That's no longer correct. The seller has to do it. So if they have a roof warranty, which would be amazing, I don't really know of any of those that work, but foundation is the primary thing. That's going to be the number one thing. And your seller, if there is a transferable warranty, is now obligated to provide the warranty transferred to the buyer at closing, paid for by the seller. Okay? Y'all have questions? Doesn't that feel like a big deal? Like, I think we kind of just skate on by. I mean, not that we don't do it, but we kind of don't do it. I don't know, we gave them the stuff. We gave them
It
the
seems like,
stuff.
it seems like it should be optional, like who pays for it. Like
Yep.
it should be check the box,
Negotiable.
buyer to pay for it or seller to pay for it.
I wish they'd have done that. I wish they'd have done that also because I think it would have drawn attention to it. Right? Then you'd have had to stop and think about, oh, the transferable one. This still is just going to become a sentence in black and we don't stop and read it all the time. So we forget to discuss it. I would have liked a box better also, but it's not what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, next year. That's right. All right, y'all have any other questions about this whole thing? So right now, sometimes people will, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not even looking at you. I'm so sorry.
So could this be changed in special provisions? Should the buyer say, I will pay for it? Could you write buyer will pay for?
Yes, you can write anything informational, and they're changing that paragraph too. So, but a piece of information that the buyer wants to convey to the seller.
The buyer wants to pay.
Yes.
So if we're representing the seller and we get an amendment to replace the knob on the thing, when we hire the contractor, we should create the scope of work and say only change the knob. And that way they don't tell us that it needs a new filter and a new thingamabob. They only replace the knob.
So
Because
I
once
would
we know about
actually,
it, then we gotta disclose it, so. it's
that's
better
right.
for
So
us.
I would just use, I would use the exact amendment words and say, tell your seller to use. So really your seller needs to be the one as much as possible,
Right.
right? Hiring the repair guy, and your seller needs to instruct the repair guy. This is what the amendment says. It says repair the knob. And I'm gonna be downstairs and I don't want to discuss anything but the knob. Do you have any questions about like what size of knob or
Color.
what color? Yeah, let's have our full knob discussion right now. And then I'm giving you my credit card and you are out the front door. No other, here's the flaw with this. I can't believe this is being recorded. Thanks for going with me on my little knob journey. Here's what's wrong with this in reality is that so many repair people sell other things while they're there, right? They walk in the front door with and they get a bonus if they sell an extra service. I mean, that's so common. And so avoiding the conversation of what else they might attempt to sell you. I can just see sellers locked in their bedroom or something. Go back, let her know when you're done. I mean,
Especially when it's the buyer's vendor, when they're having the inspection done and they say whatever they want, it's like, we have to go off of their word.
It's, I mean, all that I think this does that's good is it does help with clarity. Helps with clarity. And right now, buyers would like to have just bought their dream home and had everything just awesome. And so it's better if we're clear up front. And if I'm the seller's agent, because I am, then I'm gonna receive the amendment. I'm gonna say, okay, I'm just letting you know that they'll have someone out to fix the knob tomorrow. I'm gonna be sure that I have it in writing, not the words, they're gonna fix the air conditioner. I'm gonna have the words, they're gonna fix the knob.
Right.
I don't even think an air conditioner has a knob. We're just going with it. All right, it's interesting to think it all through though, and to realize the little things that you can do to help your client. Right, so as the seller, I'm gonna make sure that my language reflects the only thing the seller's going to do. And as a buyer's agent, I'm gonna be sure that my language reflects if I've asked them to service the AC and return it to full functionality. Then I'm gonna be sure, and if I've asked for something like that, then I'm having the inspector go back again. I think this whole re-inspection, remember last time they did forms, they did the buyer's walkthrough and acceptance form. And it now has the sentence that says, I had it re-inspected or I chose not to. So this whole re-inspection thing may be becoming part of what we see also, what we see through. Interesting. All right. Paragraph 9. So new paragraph 9B3 is amended to add the transfer of any warranties, right? So that's again back to the same change we saw before. New paragraph 9B5 provides that private transfer fees will be the obligation of the seller unless otherwise provided for in this contract, which would be the HOA addendum. Okay, we're going to go through now, I'm sorry in advance, like 4 or 5 slides about this HOA private transfer. I'm going to insult my friend from the title company. So I'm just warning you in advance.
Can't wait.
Right? Title companies have done exactly what they feel like doing in regards to who they charge for what. Transfer fees, they're called all kinds of things. And in my experience, there was no, title company people will answer you with great confidence about why they're doing what they're doing. And a different title company will also answer with great confidence about why they're doing what they're doing. They're splitting these buyer and seller charges up from the HOA in completely different ways, depending on which title company you close at. Things like Castle Hills has a foundation, so it's a charitable donation.
Like Lantana.
Yeah, that buyers are required to make. Well, this doesn't really address that, but it will at some point, because still in documents, that fee is not disclosed anywhere prior to closing. And buyers get to closing and they're shocked. Right? If they're really close, it's a problem. So I'm going to go through these pages where they're trying to make it clear who pays for what. It's still clear as mud. And that's the other thing I'm just going to tell you in advance. If you have questions when you see the closing statement, ask the title company person for an explanation. Then have a friend in the title company and ask them. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. If you give the same contract to 2 or, which I'm allowed to do because I'm just who I am, right? I give it to 2 or 3 and I ask them to prepare me a closing statement and send it back. They're all different. How can that be true? What is? Sorry.
So I'm curious. This contract now changes and says it's the seller's responsibility.
Says it's the seller's responsibility unless provided for otherwise, which is going to be the HOA addendum,
Right.
which is still clear as mud. Okay, I just thought I'd show you. This is what the law looks like. This is the law. So this is the Texas Property Code. It clearly defines private transfer fee over and over and over again. There really should not be differences between title companies. But you know, they have their favorite agents, and then the other agents are jerk and hard to get along with. And yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Not all of them. Some of them are max professional, but a lot of them aren't. I'm sorry. Right? And you get out into unknown territory, which this office works in so much. Right? You guys are out in the outburbs, whatever you want to call that. And so they're doing whatever they want to. So how do you help your client? Well, this is the definition by law of a private transfer fee. It's quite detailed. All right, paragraph 13. All right, so this is paragraph 9. Says will be the obligation of the seller. Paragraph 13 now talks about prorations. Okay, Rents and prepaid regular periodic maintenance fees. They added that. Why do you guess they added that? Because title companies are doing whatever in the hell they want to with maintenance fees from HOAs. They're not prorating them, they're just whatever. Because it wasn't really spelled out previously. You get in a lawsuit and your buyer expected you to help protect them, and we don't even know what we're talking about. I mean, we're not transfer fee, maintenance fee, HOA specialists, nor should we be required to be. That's a title company job, and it just has not been clearly defined so that they are in the hot seat about it, not us. So they're trying, right? You can see several different places where they're trying to get that title company to do the right thing. Okay? A few more. This is the HOA, all right? So they took deposits for reserves and put it under fees, deposits for reserves, except for what's in paragraph A and in paragraph C, should be C, right? Buyer or seller shall pay the title company, that's D. C is where you put how much the buyer will pay, and then the seller will pay any excess. All that is still the same. I just want you to not assume that what your title company is doing and saying confidently is just the way it is. That's not been true historically. Therefore, we've got a whole bunch of crap that changed, right? Because the title company is regulated by the Texas Department of Insurance. They are not a party to the contract. They really are kind of out there doing whatever they want to with very little accountability. And so TREC is trying to assure that if you closed at any one of 5 title companies, your closing statement would look the same. And that has not been historically the truth at all. Okay. Do y'all have questions? Do you feel, I just also want you to be aware. Oh, I didn't know that title companies were just making decisions about what goes in what column.
You know, and a couple of situations that we had where we're talking about C there, where it
Yes.
says the seller will be responsible. Sellers weren't realizing that. So we were the bearer of bad news when we would tell them, okay, but there's this assessment for the HOA and it's $5,000, and per the contract you signed, you're responsible for that, and we're gonna have to collect that from you.
Yeah.
That's where we're seeing, and I'm glad that kind of trying to make it a little clearer, because that's not a fun seat to be in, to have to call them and say, well.
And I think agents don't really pay any attention, right? They're not really reading this too clearly.
Well, a lot of times for in their defense, the agent wasn't aware of it, neither was the seller in some cases. They
I
weren't
know.
aware it had been assessed, so they kind of glazed over that because they didn't have anything. And then when we uncover it, getting the HOA docs, then it's an issue.
And there's really no out for the seller, right? There is an out for the buyer. If the buyer suddenly realizes they're gonna have to pay $5,000 they weren't expecting to, then the buyer has an out. They're sad because they want the home, but they do have an out. Seller really doesn't have an out, right? They're stuck, pretty thoroughly stuck. So again, give this a little bit more of your time and attention, pay attention to your closing statements. Go back over your 2022 statements between different title companies and just kind of see what people are doing. It's really fascinating that it isn't more regulated, and they are trying. And I think I sound bad about title companies, and I don't really mean to. I don't think anybody means anything evil. I just think there was a lot of freedom in what you do.
Or a lot of unclarity
Yes.
in our contract, right?
Yes, a lot of unclarity. I like that. That's right. All right. And then this is just the summary, right? So it's a good little summary. Regular fees are prorated. Everything else is addressed in the HOA addendum.
Can I make another comment?
Yes,
I think
please
we may
do.
see this year that we haven't seen ever before.
Oh,
Is where it talks about in
Unprecedented,
your
oh my God.
contract where it says, you know, if the prorations aren't correct, and as you guys know, we pay a third party to give us tax estimates, right? Tax
Right,
certificates,
right.
but they're an estimate,
Right.
right? So I think this year we may more than ever before, your contract says if they're wrong, the buyer and seller can hook up later and work that out. Never seen that happen. So this may be our year. Because I think our assessments are more than anybody
Way up.
would think. So,
And people keep asking, how can I fight my assessment? And it's like, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but if you,
good luck.
probably your house went up in value that much. I mean, I'm sorry, but probably the assessment is correct. I mean, yeah, that's a great point. So for your buyer, right, they need to understand they may end up owing quite a bit more property tax than what they collected. It was an estimate. They can try to go back to the seller. But it's interesting. This is all just developing and continuing, and everything that happens due to a lawsuit or 2 or 3 or 4.
So this is interesting. When I go back and read this on paragraph 13, it says the parties shall adjust the prorations when tax statements for the current year are available. Doesn't say maybe, said shall.
Says shall.
So I guess your
You could
buyer
sue.
could go back to the seller and right here in their contract, it says they shall. Now, how much money is it gonna be? Is it really gonna be more fast? Well, I don't know.
This year it may be
And
enough.
this year it might.
Yeah, this year it might be enough. That was great. Good. Great. Okay, y'all okay about all this? All right. All right, here's our special provisions. Paragraph 11 is amended to further clarify the intent of the paragraph by replacing the terms factual statements and business details with informational items. So, which is now defined, real estate brokers cannot practice law and are prohibited from adding, deleting, or modifying the contract. So when you ask, can I change the contract in special provisions? And I said, yes. You just have to be very clear, right? It's actually not what they want you to do, right? They like this special provisions to be, seller will have home professionally cleaned and provide a receipt. If that's not on the amendment, that's a special provision, right? I have people email me all the time. Can you tell me how to say this in special provisions? What do you think my answer is? No, I cannot tell you how to say that. Who can tell you how to say that? Lawyer. Yep, and that's it. I mean, there's just a period. And your little buyer doesn't want to pay a lawyer. Your little seller doesn't want to pay. I'm sorry. Gosh, I feel bad about that. I'm sorry that they don't want to pay $250 to an attorney. I'm sorry. And then there's just a period. Do it or don't do it. I'm not writing it. They, as a principal to the transaction, may add a statement. So you need from the buyer or seller a sentence that they would like for you to insert in special provisions. Not something, I need a sentence that says something like, I need a sentence that addresses that knob. No, I need a sentence. You tell me exactly what you want me to say, and I will say that exactly, or we're going to call an attorney. So let's talk about title company attorneys for a minute. Sorry, I'm just bashing her, and she's so
I'm
awesome.
not coming back.
I know. But let's just be real about it for a minute. So how can they help you? Title company attorneys.
I'm killing mine today trying to do curative work on a transaction that's at another title company so they can get it closed because that title company won't help them. So they can help with curative work.
Curative work? Can they give you a special provision sentence? They can. Then when you go to court, what happens? They didn't represent anybody, right? So if your buyer needs to speak to an attorney about their options, does the title company attorney count? Is there such a thing as a free attorney who's going to actually be on their side?
No.
Are y'all hearing me? No such thing. That title company attorney is wonderful and they will have very helpful conversations. And many, many times, that's all you need. But they don't represent anybody. So-
Especially if the deal is at that title company. They can't advise one party or the other once that contract is at our title company. We can't say, well, if I was representing the buyer, I would do this. If I was representing the seller, I would do this because they are a disinterested third party.
And a lot of them also have a law practice, so they may be willing to talk to your buyer and send an invoice. Okay, at that point, then there's a
There's a different
representation agreement. But this, I'm gonna call the title company and get free help. Just, okay, it's just free. It's not, if the going gets tough, it's not really worth anything. Okay? All right, so special provisions, I think the funniest part is that they added lines. So how long is what we're writing gonna be? Longer, but I mean, they want it contained right here.
Sometimes I see in here things like seller using 1031 exchange. period,
Right.
Just so they know.
Just
Or-
informational.
Right, or sometimes we will see, because there were too many names on the front of the contract, we'll see additional seller names in here or additional buyer names in here. But
Perfect.
those are the kind of things that we see most of.
That's perfect use of special provisions, right? Additional seller names, additional buyer names, the 1031 exchange, just, that's what I'm using. It doesn't matter to the seller at all if the buyer is using 1031 exchange, but it's information. All right. Here's what this means to me. Quit practicing law. Just because your buyer or seller can't afford an attorney or doesn't want to, right? Stop doing it. Stop trying to find someone who will do it. No, no, no. This is likely the biggest financial transaction of their life. They can afford an attorney. Period. Okay. Paragraph 18B is amended to add that if no closing occurs, the escrow agent may require a written release of liability before releasing the earnest money. Have they been doing that anyway?
Yes.
Say yes. Right? They will not let go of that earnest money without a signed release of earnest money. They really, this is just interesting, right? Just like the lender is not a party to the contract, neither is the title company. They didn't have really the right to do that, but they did it anyway. So now we're giving them the right. Okay? How long will title companies hold on to earnest money?
Until it's clear to bank, until instructed otherwise.
Will they hold it for 2 years or 10 years?
2, and they gotta give it to the state, or it's 3, we have to give it to the state if y'all haven't agreed on who's getting it.
So I just want you to hear me, because you're not telling your clients that. What'd you just say, 2 or maybe
It's
3?
3 years. We eschew to the state every 3 years, any earnest money that we have that you guys haven't agreed to.
So this
getting.
belief that somehow the title company is suddenly gonna get tired and give up the money. So when you look at a title company profit and loss statement, is there a line item for interest? Say yes. Are they earning interest on thousands of dollars of earnest money that are in dispute? Say yes. Not their fault, not their fault, not their problem, not dissing anybody. This is just reality, right? They are not a party to the contract. They don't have an opinion about your earnest money. Are they earning money on the disputed earnest money? Yes. And your little buyer, so it's the principal of that thing. That buyer was mean. That seller was mean. That seller's agent was mean. Nobody, I mean, like literally nobody cares. Nobody cares. The title company may even agree with you. The lender may agree with you. Ooh, yeah, they were a bucket of mess. That's the nicest thing I could think of. At the last minute, I realized, I'm like, oh, I gotta stay in the line. A bucket of mess. Oh, okay. Right? So this idea that someone else is going to do something about the earnest money, that it's required, that the contract said that it's always a negotiation. Always a negotiation to release the earnest money. 100% of the time. There is no automatic, Well, what are we gonna do? I don't know. Are you gonna go with the baseball bat or what do you think's gonna happen right now? Well, we should be able to make them. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna bail you out. What do you mean make them? That's called court. Make them is called court.
And isn't it pretty straightforward though? Like, I mean, the contract specifically tells you who gets the earnest money, who doesn't. I mean, that's the purpose of the contract, right?
So while I hear you talking, that is not what happens in the real life. So yes, I completely agree with you. It is very straightforward. There should be no argument. And I can be very strong in my opinions because they're fact-based, they're based on years of experience. Yes, but if the other side just says, no, you were ugly, I'm not doing it.
If they're being unreasonable, you can't, unreasonable,
I
you
mean,
can't.
I hear it all the time. I don't care. Take me to court. Go ahead. You're just ugly. You're mean.
And do you think a lot of times it has to do with how well the agent is maneuvering with that person?
Oh, I think it's
You know,
so
it's
much.
absolutely.
And their own knowledge, our own agents get into trouble because they say things like, well, you're guaranteed to get your earnest money back. Oh, good God. You're never guaranteed anything.
So often when I see it get in the ditch, it's because of how the agent is speaking to that client versus, okay, so here's the reality of the contract. Yes, you probably should be getting it back, but here's where we are.
It's always a negotiation, 100% of the time. It's a negotiation. And, okay. So I want to look at 18D. All right. I would use this phrase all the time. I use it all the time as your broker. I send it to you in emails all the time as your broker. Because when you have the client that says, I don't care, they're just ugly and they're mean and I'm so inconvenienced and I want that earnest money. Well, you're not entitled to the earnest money. I don't care, I just want it. I just want it. 18D, I mean, all day long, and I hear it way more. I mean, right now, I have that client who's very attorney-like he thinks he's all that, a bag of chips official. He's still wrong, which is what I just wrote him this morning. So getting back in the car will be fun. I said, I appreciate your professionalism and you're still incorrect. Perhaps you should do some more research. Whatever. He's got SAT words, man. He's lining them up. I'm like, I am so unimpressed, but okay. 18D, I mean, at this point, he can't SAT, he can't outword me. Like, no, that's what happened. All right, damages. Any party who wrongfully fails or refuses to sign a release acceptable to the escrow agent, they're all acceptable to the escrow agent as long as they're signed within 7 days of receipt of the request, will be liable to the other party for damages. Damages, how big are damages? Come on.
There's not a number. Because it's subjected to the.
You're right, it can be more, but treble damages are very normal, 3 times. The earnest money, reasonable attorney fees. How many of y'all have ever even seen one of those? I love them. Reasonable attorney fees. Well, I don't find any of them reasonable, but okay. And all costs of suit. So in this case, my very professional guy is just wrong. And I'm not an attorney, and I've told him that a million times, I'm not an attorney, but he's wrong. He is running this risk big time. So your pissed off client who just doesn't like the other people, who this just whole thing sucks for me. I'm so inconvenienced. Okay, you're coming up. Give the earnest money within 7 days. Or you are liable to the other party. You can just be principled and right and so inconvenienced. But if you're not right per the language on the contract, you need to give back the earnest or negotiate, right? You can split the earnest money. You can give $1,000 to this person and $4,000 to that. It doesn't matter. Get something on that release and get it resolved within 7 days, or one party or the other is liable. Okay, now ask questions. Y'all don't look good.
Working for free. So you save your own butt.
It does, I mean,
Well, when you say one party or the other, how would the buyer be liable here?
well, if they're in default,
They didn't show up to close.
They
They were
didn't,
supposed
I
to
mean,
close with no
they can
reason.
be in default, they can show up with an FHA loan when it's a conventional contract, that's default. I mean, there's a lot of ways the buyer can be in default. They have to have abided by the seller can also be in default, right? If they don't do the repairs correctly, appropriately per the amendment, they can be in default. And then they don't want to give up the earnest money. Well, I was, oh gosh, this one that, where the guys just, well, I was trying to get it done. It's so, okay, but there was no extension to the contract. There was nothing.
Oh, it didn't work.
You're just, and these buyers, oh, and they use these big words. Okay, just give them the earnest money. Okay, y'all okay? You look really solemn right now. Okay,
So if, we are the knowledge broker,
I think so too.
and
I love that.
a
We're
lot,
the knowledge broker.
a lot of times we have to educate the other side.
Yeah.
So if we get into a situation where our buyer terminates and they don't want to sign the form, should we kindly remind the other agent
Yes,
of paragraph 18D or whatever it is?
that is a common email that you should have ready to go. That says, just remember, because here's the thing, they already agreed to that. It's a part of the executed contract. The contract doesn't say, well, if you're satisfied and happy, then you can release the earnest money. It says, if you don't sign that within 7 days and you're incorrect, then this is what you're liable for. It's very impactful when you remind the other agent because they don't know it's there. They have no idea that all parties already agreed to that. I mean, I get into arguments where the other broker would even send me things back and say, what do you think this means? I just write back and say, well, I think it means that if your party is incorrect, my party can sue you for this long list of expenses. And I always write, and PS, if you've seen reasonable attorney fees, please give me a referral to that attorney. That's not trying to be friendly. Keep it temperature down.
Passive aggressive.
Passive aggressive. That is the rule of being a good broker. I've decided. Passive aggressive. I am so
That's what my
sweet.
kids tell me I am all the time.
Yeah.
You're just passive aggressive.
I am so sweet. I'm gonna bite your butt
Honey,
as
don't you
soon
want
as you turn
Honey, don't you
around.
want to take out the trash? Honey, don't you want to?
My husband, we've been going to some Christmas activities and people say, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. She's so sweet. They are high. I really don't have a sweet bone in my body, really, seriously. But it's okay.
I think that's why you're so great at your job.
Well, yes, it doesn't require sweet. Well, so you know what I have though, to defend myself from it, is I have a really long prayer list. Right, I keep a composition book beside my bed because I'm involved in so many people's lives and transactions and I understand where they are. I just add them to my prayer list because this contract is actually very bulky, right? Who's right and who's wrong is very easy most of the time, but their situation is
Or their emotion is involved and they can't see you.
absolutely, and it just breaks your heart for people. So it isn't that I don't have a heart. It's just that
That's not what we heard.
it's that, this is actually super clear and people don't want it to be. They are all wrapped up in whatever they're going through. So, all right. Paragraph 21 is amended to add with a courtesy copy to. Who do you think is supposed to go in that with a courtesy copy to?
The real estate agent.
The real estate agent.
Yeah, they finally.
Y'all
put it
quit
on
putting
there.
yourself at the top. To the buyer at me. Okay. Stop that. That is not correct. And we're gonna get into some mediation or something and they're gonna go, are you the buyer? And you're gonna go, no. Why is your name there? And I mean, it's such a loss. Just the minute you walk in and sit down and say, well, I always put my name there. Well, you're always wrong. I mean, it's awful, like it's horrible, because it's so clear. To buyer at.
You would be shocked at how many of these we get with nothing. Blank, nada, nothing. You're like.
So, and that's not really correct either, right? So the important thing I would say here, because I don't think most of y'all are doing that. I think most of y'all have yourself as like a second person. And now it's clear, courtesy copy two, and you put yourself there. When you do a termination of contract and release of earnest money, how are you sending it? To whom? Who should you be sending it to?
The parties, the seller.
How
the
about
buyer.
paragraph 21? Let's read it. All notices from one party to the other must be in writing and are effective, they're in effect when mailed to, hand delivered at, or transmitted by fax or electronic transmission as follows. So if you're sending that to the other agent, then they're not effective. You have terminated the contract and the correct parties were not informed. So then we get into mediation and they say, well, did you do it by paragraph? No, I sent it to the other agent because that's what I'm supposed to do. Well, actually, no, you're supposed to do it per paragraph 21. And so they're trying to make that clearer. Where does the buyer want to receive notices? And then you're a courtesy copy. Trying to make that clearer. Okay? Y'all don't like this, do you? Go. I love having you here. Thanks for being here.
So what is supposed to go on the top line? Like I always put phone number and email address, that's obvious, but like the top line doesn't really say anything. So are we
Their
supposed to put a
address.
physical address there?
So some people do because they want you to take the extra step of like certify mail it to them. But I mean, that's a pain in the honey to certify mail every notice that's going back and forth when we're struggling to either get it closed or terminated. But I would just put phone and email. I think email to the buyer that the buyer is going or seller are going to receive is very adequate.
Can I ask something there?
Yeah.
The
Yes.
only problem we see, and this has happened to us, if we don't have an address and then the phone gets disconnected and their emails get returned, we don't have any way to send a demand to an address, certified mail, so we can prove per your paragraph that we followed what we're supposed to do. Just FYI, so
So
I would encourage
an
you to put
address
an
is
address
better.
there. If it gets to that point, then you have it.
So if they have an address and an email, do we have to do both or just one or the other?
Well, I think you have to do both because it says per as follows. All notices are effective when as follows. So you need to do both.
And it says when.
But it says
mailed-
or, since it says or, can we get by with that in? Since it says when mailed to and delivered at or faxed or.
Maybe one. I haven't ever been to a
Sorry.
lawsuit about
I'm
that.
thinking because.
I just
of
want to
or.
tell you, maybe, yeah.
I think because.
What happens right now is that none of those ways, I mean, I think if we've done it one of the ways in paragraph 21, we probably got a leg to stand on. But
when
right
they're
now,
blank,
they're just sending it to the agent and the agent is not who's on paragraph 21.
Feels a little bit awkward, unprofessional to send it directly to their client, like
Exactly.
I'm excluding them from the conversation. Obviously, if they put with the courtesy copy too, it's great, but it just kind of feels like I'm overstepping the bound, going directly to their client.
Well, I agree with that. And so as an agent, I never sent anything direct to the person. That just felt wrong. It still would feel wrong. But I mean, what we're here to do is talk about what's real. And this is real, so.
So what is all notices? Because obviously termination, okay, that's one thing, but are we sending amendments and everything to all parties?
You're supposed to. So I'm gonna be ugly about an agent. I won't even call a sign, it's okay. Russell Rhodes used to, but he knows I tell this story, so it's all okay. Russell Rhodes used to never return an amendment signed until after the option period expired. Because he wanted to see if you were ready and willing to terminate. Because if you weren't ready and willing to terminate, then his seller wasn't going to do any repairs. Well, how does that feel? Crappy. That's why you send an amendment direct to the party. Right, you're taking a little bit of agent interference maybe away, because sometimes it's interference.
If the other agent doesn't fill that out with the information, do I just send it to the, or do I request it?
If it's just empty, then you just send it to the agent and the title company. I'm sure the title company's thrilled to receive all that, but that's what I would do.
And if they don't put with a courtesy copy too, then you're directly communicating with
their client.
With their client. Mhm. So just think about all the people who aren't gonna go through contract training in the next, between now and
How mad they're gonna be
February 1st.
when you
Oh
email
my
their client.
gosh, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. These little changes, I think, are good. They bring great clarity and they're gonna cause some havoc out there, right? A little
Till
bit.
everybody gets used to it again.
Change, conflict, growth.
Change, conflict, growth. There you go. All right, they've changed the amendment up, right, to match the contract so that you know that paragraph 7 governs the completion of any repairs that you have on this amendment, right? It's reminding you to put a good, clear scope of work. What do you want the seller to do? Exactly. And then it says again, consult an attorney. Realtors are prevented from practicing law. All right, third-party finance, here you go. I'm gonna move to this side for a little while. Sorry, Diana, I've been just, all right. See G, they've added other financing. If other financing is involved, here's your place to add it. Hard money loans, even if they're borrowing it from a family member and the lender has not seasoned it or whatever, you can add it here. Okay. Great change, really, really great change. All right, and then they just added if that it needs to be a vendor or deed of trust or whatever, a lien against the property, if the lender requires that. So your family doesn't require that. So if your family doesn't require that, neither does this. And just remember this paragraph 2B, right? We're seeing a lot of this get used right now. 3 days before closing, the buyer's lender decides that the house is not in good condition. They didn't do adequate roof repairs, so they're terminating and getting their earnest money back 3 days before closing. They can do that. I'm sorry that paragraph 2B exists, but it does. So you need to really read 2A and 2B and understand, because it is a right of termination for the buyer. Okay. Fixture leases, right? They've added these check boxes: solar panel, propane, water softener, security system, and then they added a box for oral leases. So we went through a really interesting thing where there was a propane tank buried under the ground, and the company came out and was going to dig the propane tank up. So the buyer was quite shocked by I mean, that's not a small hole, right? So it just went through a whole big thing, and it was an oral lease way out in the sticks with a cousin of a cousin or something. So we got it all worked out, but the way it came to a head was he went out there to get his propane tank.
Glad the buyers will know.
I mean, we've had some really crazy conversations, but he was unwilling to do an oral lease with someone he didn't know, right? So the new buyers had to sign up a real lease. But they didn't know all that. All right. Residential leases, and then again, all they added was oral. Because again, sometimes they'll sell a house with their daughter-in-law in it just because they don't want to evict her.
You mean their ex-daughter-in-law?
I'm just telling you. So I'm gonna write a book. Y'all get ready. All right, and then the reservation of oil, gas, and other minerals, seller does or does not waive. So they went the opposite way. does the seller waive their rights of ingress and egress and reasonable use of the property? Used to say, are they going to retain those? Now it says, are they waiving? Here's the truth. So when you're talking, I always like for you to be truthful with your clients and set the right expectations, right? If someone wants to access minerals, a mineral estate owner, could be somebody generations ago, somebody nobody even knows. If they want to access those minerals and the only way is down your driveway, they are going to win. If you do not know Texas, let me educate you about Texas. Mineral rights come first, right? The people who own now, they may have to put your property back the way it was before they started. There's all kinds of those kind of things. But can you prohibit them from accessing their mineral estates? Absolutely not. You can have all the surface rights you want, and they're driving that bulldozer right on down your driveway. Do y'all have questions about that? I mean, this is not going to happen in a subdivision, but it does happen every day. And the Texas Railroad Commission, if you'd like to complain about that, the Texas Railroad Commission is where to go. I'll point you right there. Have at it. Because that's the way it works.
What's that change? I mean, how did it used to read versus?
So it used to read reserve and retain implied rights of ingress and egress. Are they keeping them? Are they reserving them? Now it's, are they waiving them? Are they giving them away? So I don't know why they did the exact opposite, but they did.
Just to really confuse everyone.
Yeah. I don't understand why.
So if they if they check the box that says seller will retain mineral rights, does that also mean that they have access to the surface? Or
Well, in reality, yes.
unless they
Of
waive?
course, right. Even if they waive,
Because
rights
even
of
if your
ingress and
present-
egress?
Because even if your present seller waives rights, the seller, the person who has a mineral estate from forever ago, they didn't waive them.
well, I don't think it's legally possible. I think this is a really stupid paragraph.
At the
And
end of
they're
the
trying
day.
to fix stupid, so they changed how they word it. But the Railroad Commission over and over and over again gives mineral estate owners the right to access their minerals.
So what's the right box do you check?
Well, I think most sellers are going to waive. That surprised me, by the way. Who's speaking? Okay, I got it. So seller does waive the right. So the seller doesn't need to ingress or egress that property to access minerals going forward. So most of the time, if you're representing the buyer, you want the seller to waive it. I just happen to be of the opinion that probably doesn't really matter, but you might as well try. Okay?
So if you're buying a property, you don't want to buy something that has mineral rights that are staying with the seller, because one way or the other, they're gonna get on your property if they want to.
When you're out buying a ranch or something, like, I don't think it matters in a subdivision. I don't think they could get permission to go in and tear up a subdivision. But out on a ranch or something, are they gonna get the right to go out and access their minerals? Yes, I believe they would get that. Historically, that they have won every time. Okay. So just to note that the new home contract, we're gonna look at a couple others real quick. They changed basically the same way, except for now a little bit of seller's disclosure about flooding and water is a part of the contract. So new homes don't have a seller's disclosure notice. So now they're going to answer this question if you use this contract. Now, most builders have their own contract and they don't promise anything to anybody ever. So your buyer is totally screwed. But if you use this contract, now they're at least disclosing what they know about flood. Okay? I know this doesn't happen very often. And then farm and ranch, the same thing. They've made a few changes. So farm and ranch, they've done the same thing, that now you have to disclose about wetlands and flooding and all kinds of water things are a part of the contract. And then the other change, I'm gonna find it, is the land situated in the county or counties, because we have so many that are in multiple counties, so they're addressing that. Yes,
Sorry.
no, great.
So if you go back to the new home contract, if there's a new home, new construction home, smaller builder on MLS, and our client wants to make an offer on that property, the seller needs to fill out the new home contract.
Well, so I would go ahead and submit it on this form and just leave those boxes blank. And then when the seller checks a box, you'll initial next to each one. It is kind of questionable, but I think because this contract is much fairer to the buyer, if you're representing the buyer, you vastly prefer this. Right, I mean, we're just coming out of the worst time that I've ever seen for builders' abuse of the public. And so we'll see how it proceeds forward, but I mean, they were just awful. Just did whatever they want to, and all their contracts say that they can't. So,
But we need to submit this and say, here's, our part of the contract, fill out your part of the contract. Because obviously, we don't want them to just fill it out and well, they can't execute that, that's what we start the initial, but
right,
it's gonna go back and forth a few
you're
times.
gonna go back
before
and
we-
forth a few times, that's right. But I would go ahead and start this way. And you might just ask them verbally, do they want you to check these boxes? Do you know of any wetlands or flood? And then the seller can sign. But assuming the seller checks a box, then your buyer needs to go back and initial. Okay. All right, just reminder, this last slide is just a reminder that you have to use the forms. If there is a form, you have to use one. And so we kind of mess that up a lot. You just talk on the phone and email around and don't use a form when there is a form. We keep getting into trouble. So look at that. All right, what do y'all think? Have questions? It's okay, right? Most of it's okay. It's not a bad thing. The challenge is gonna come when the other side doesn't even know there is a new contract. And I loved it. Well, my broker's okay with me using the wrong form. Well, potentially, you should be concerned about that.
Why don't you come to one of our trainings?
Why don't you come to a training? Why don't you use your brain and understand what a risk you're living?
You know, I have that problem with other agents using the correct seller's disclosure.
Oh, yeah.
A bunch of them using the old one that's just the 2 pages. And it's like, please.
Well, and obviously, right, the difference in seller's disclosure notices is all about water. And so when you're representing the buyer, if the seller will not use the correct form to disclose all about water, that should be a red flag. Yes.
Why don't we allow maybe Holiday to use their own seller disclosure that they love and use?
I know. I know.
We
It's
just tell them that they have. a
seller's
certain
disclosure notice
demo
is not promulgated by TREC. What'd you say?
That they have a certain demo over there that we don't
What's
always
that?
like to get crossed with, but just curious.
Well, because it's not promulgated by TREC. So there is one that TREC has, and there is one that the association has, and we like the one the association uses because it's the best protection for our sellers.
It's the most thorough.
It's the most thorough. And if your seller wants the least thorough seller's disclosure notice, you also should think about that. Oh, so it is your goal to disclose the least possible. Oh my God, this is problematic.
I have one more question about disclosure.
Yeah.
A lot of times our clients get real disclosing to us, and there isn't a real estate agent disclosure. I'm real curious where or if there is a place that we are supposed to disclose that. And
So even an email will do. If there's something that you know, they did tell me that they had someone come out and look at, drains, French drains, putting in French drains. They haven't done it, but they did tell me they had someone come look. That kind of disclosure is okay just in an email, we just want them to know. Because, if they don't open something, they're still responsible for having received the information. So the same thing, even if it's not on a form, they are in receipt of the information. Yes, and just the big disclosure thing, oh my God, I cannot count how many lawsuits we are in right now, just over insurance proceeds. They filed for insurance and they wrote on the seller's disclosure notice, oh no, I've never received any proceeds that I didn't use as intended. And they absolutely did. But 2 years later, the buyer has a roofer come out and the roofer goes, well, these are old gutters. I'm not going to replace the gutters. These are old gutters. And then they go back to the seller and the seller goes, well, yeah, I mean, I replaced the roof, but I didn't repair the gutters. So now we're talking about the seller being liable for new gutters, treble damages, lawsuit costs. I mean, those gutters that they thought keeping that $3,500 was just, woo, they are so smart. I mean, if you get an insurance check and it details what you're getting it for, you better do those repairs. Every single one of them, exactly the way it is written. It's really a problem.
I know that disclosure is a big issue in general,
#1 lawsuit.
and yet I find it's a little uncomfortable because often, like you were saying earlier, you have a lot of vendors who come out and try to sell stuff, but them trying to sell you a new AC condenser, oh, you really need an AC condenser, and that's really their opinion, it's really them trying to make a sale. Does that really constitute a material fact that then needs to be disclosed?
So I don't think so. I think sometimes they'll even they'll write it, you know, and actually I like that better if they'll write, gave a quote for new duct work, $3,200. I'd rather them write it because it is just an opinion. I think they have to disclose what is not functioning as it should be. Then they have to disclose it. And once they come and tell you that the thingamabob is broken.
Yeah.
Then you have to
We
disclose it.
just had an inspector who will say, this is garbage and it's 25 years old and it's breaking, and you'll have someone who's actually licensed in that vocation come out and go, this is brand new. And so I just wonder how many opinions you really have to have before you have it, that you have to disclose.
Good
I
question.
know. Is that not the question of 2022? Is what's a fact? Pretty sure you and I can't solve it, but we can try, right? And we can assist with getting more than one opinion and having reputable vendors that we support and give over and over to. Those kinds of things do matter. Like having a foundation company or an engineer that doesn't always recommend peers, right? Like foundation companies go out and surprise, they recommend peers because that's the only time you're going to pay them. So they all do all the time. So having some other people that don't always recommend, that you could actually go to mediation or court and say, well, here's 3 times that structured said no repair needed. So this time when they said it, I had reason to trust. So keeping all those records of all your transactions can help you so much. We have a lady right now who's suing for EMFs, saying she didn't know. And on MLS that there was a power line in her backyard, and all the photos on MLS have the power line and the power pole. She has a pole in her yard. She says she didn't know this.
Is she likely to win that case?
Well, I don't know yet. And so now I'm mad, right? So now I want to go.
We all want to know.
Well, I want to sue her for our costs because we're going to spend our time and money to show these MLS. Well, assuming she was blindfolded when she visited the property.
Did
which
she have a
did
survey
3
done?
times.
Did she have a survey done?
She had a survey done. It's on the survey. She visited the property 3 times. But let's just assume she literally is dumb as a rock, which I've learned when you go to court, a lot of times they assume that you're really stupid and we are held to a higher standard of disclosure. So apparently when you show a home with a power pole in the backyard, you should record yourself going, by the way, this is a power pole.
Althea says pointed out 3 times, then take your check to the bank.
That's right, pointed out 3 times. But now we're showing the MLS photos, like, okay, I mean, we did this, and MLS photos. The listing agent just took the MLS photos down, but I'm just not nice. I sent her an email that said, I saw you took them down, but I already had them. See you in court. because we have to. Our buyer is the stupid one, by the way. We don't have to. But
So how are you even trying to defend that?
we're just defending our little agent who, you know, is a phone user. So by the way, y'all stop talking on the phone. They just chitter chatter on the phone.
Not writing.
Stop doing that. Actually, I don't know. And let me just tell you the real why. Who do you know that loves talking on the phone? They want you to text them. They want you to email them. They don't want to talk to you on the phone. Get it in writing, whatever it is. Quit chitter chattering. So we represent the buyer, and this lady says she didn't see the power pole, and it was up to the buyer to disclose the power pole. It's on the survey. They looked at it 3 times. The buyer's agent has a video of walking through the house with her and spanning across the backyard. Now, she doesn't say, here is the power pole, but the power pole is in full view. And MLS. So I think we'll be fine, but I mean, they're gonna assume that this buyer is dumb as a rock. That's what they're gonna do. Because that's how this goes. It's crazy.
And I'm confused, so you are representing the agent who has the buyer
Is
set-
suing
Okay,
the homeowner and the buyer's agent, their agent. They're suing their agent
Because there's a pole in her. yard.
because there's EMFs
okay.
and she's gonna die a young death.
I don't know. what
Okay.
it is.
Electronic magnetic field. coming
Don't
out.
EMFers.
I mean, and through the years, so she's, we tried to go to museums. They showed those YouTube videos, right? Have you ever seen, because I was on the school board for so long. You know, McAuliffe Elementary in Highland Village has power lines over it, and they used to walk